Greetings, fellow theater historians. My name is Justin Kalin, and as I'm hoping maybe one or two of you read on D2L, the presentation I'll be making today is about the theater history movement known as the queer theater movement. Um, my research was also involved a lot in Mae West as a playwright and her involvement as really a pioneer of this movement, which says begins in the 1960s or is widely accepted as beginning in the 1960s, though West really had a lot to do with it and heavy involvement in the 1930s, a fact not often explored. So before I really begin, I will probably interchange the words gay and queer when referring to this movement, and although they generally mean separate things, for the sake of this movement and referring to it, they're often interchanged. So I only ever mean to refer to one movement, not two separate ones. So, what is queer theater? What is this movement? Darren Blaney, author of the article 1964, The Birth of Gay Theater, describes this movement as being by, for, and about uncloseted gay people, meaning that before this time in American theater, gay characters were not explored in a sympathetic light. If they were ever explored, or if homosexuality at all was ever explored, it was a destructive and negative force. It was bad, and it brought terrible repercussions onto characters. It was not ever viewed sympathetically or unapologetically, or just gay people were not really mentioned as parts of society, more or less. That all began to change in 1964 with Lanford Wilson's piece, The Madness of Lady Bright, which is basically a really long monologue about a drag queen, an aging drag queen. So this man regales the audience with stories of his life and what his homosexuality brought in and out of his life. And it was the first time in theater history, or especially in this country's theater history, that a gay character unapologetically but sympathetically was portrayed. It was just a lifestyle as opposed to a negative force. Lanford Wilson wrote and staged this piece in Cafe Chino, and what's interesting is that Oscar Beckett, the author of our textbook, History of the Theater, mentions both Cafe Chino and Lanford Wilson. On page 481, Beckett, mentioning Cafe Chino, says that it supplemented the decline of the off-Broadway shows and credited the off-Broadway formation beginning around 1958 in this very cafe. Never mentions that the queer theater took off in the same cafe or that it shared its home here. On page 525, Lanford Wilson is described, and a long list of his shows, very successful shows, are mentioned, and his writing is described as minimal, with a focus on character relationships and hidden feelings. So, none of his works listed were The Madness of Lady Bright, and it was not mentioned that he almost single-handedly is referenced as the pioneer of an entire movement, which strikes me as a little odd. So that is the general historical background to the queer theater movement. My research involved Mae West. For those of you who don't know, Mae West is a very celebrated and very well-known starlet of both stage and screen. She was a sex icon, a blonde bombshell, very outspoken and very controversial for her opinions on relationships and sex and other very taboo subjects of that time. What a lot of people don't know, actually, is that she was an avid playwright. And she used her playwriting as a vehicle to voice her opinions, which is not uncommon. Most playwrights do the same thing. Her writing was just very much pushing the envelope. Biography.com mentions that her show, Sex, was raided by city officials, and West was arrested on April 19th, 1927, and sentenced to 10 days in jail for her staging of the show. Basically, Mae West's character is a very controversial one, much more so than Lanford Wilson, and she was quite brave in her hopes of portraying her opinions. However, that's a brief history on her. So her relation to the theater, or the queer theater movement, begins with her show called The Drag. Now, Gail Finney, the author of Queering the Stage, Critical Displacement in Theater of Else Lasker Schur and Mae West, describes this play, The Drag, as being set in New York City in the 1920s. The voice speaking in defense of homosexuality is an authoritative one, a medical doctor who informed himself sufficiently about the subject to know that many people are simply born homosexual and should not be blamed. The opposite exposition is represented by his old friend, the judge, who regards homosexuals as evil to be stamped out, declaring that they should all be banished to a desert island. As the viewer gradually learns, the irony at the heart of this play is that the judge's son, Raleigh, is in fact an active homosexual. So the ensuing 2 acts of the show detail Raleigh's life and his escapades as a gay male. It mentions both the hardships and what he enjoys and just how he lives his lifestyle, so it was very sympathetic and it was very unapologetic. Biography.com also mentions that she successfully staged this show in both Connecticut, and it was a smash hit in Paterson, New Jersey in the late 1920s. So, like her show Sex, controversial subject matter, but widely popular with her audiences. So, staged in those places, she intended to bring it to New York City. She intended to bring it to Broadway. She had out-of-town tryouts and was then notified by those in charge of censorship at that time. The show wasn't going to happen. It wasn't going to happen on Broadway. They wouldn't allow it. This time, Mae West actually backed off. I think this was very much in large part due to a bill passed in 1927 in New York City called the Padlock Bill, and it was a censorship bill that basically said anything that would push the envelope too far, anything that would be too edgy, maybe corrupt audiences or be bad, basically, they wouldn't allow, and homosexuality was quite toward the top of that list. In fact, it would appear historically that West's ambition of portraying openly gay characters and gay themes on the Broadway stage would not be realized until 1978. Roger Oliver, author of Evolution of Contemporary Gay Theater, mentions that the first show on Broadway to focus on gay characters and themes as realistically as they were portrayed in off-Broadway theater was in 1928's Torch Song Trilogy by Harvey Feinstein. So she was pretty well ahead of her time there. Another major reason for her involvement is widely believed to be a part of the pansy craze. The pansy craze was an underground movement, and according to Ann Parsons, author of the article "Chicago's Prohibition-Era Pansy Craze," she offers a very dictionary definition. Pansy, to describe a gay, effeminate male, and craze refers to the prohibition upswing in the popularity of gay clubs, cabarets, and performers. Prohibition in this era was historically a failure, and it aimed to bring an end to alcohol consumption in the country. Because of this, speakeasies were founded. They were a safe haven for drinking and entertainment, so people from all walks of life were introduced to each other and shared their interests, and really widely because of this, an interest in gay entertainment really took off. So in the 1960s, to say that it was finally accepted was not really the case. It was accepted in the 1930s, as you can tell by things like the pansy craze. Gay music, music produced by gay people and about gay themes, theater, existed and were accepted by people in the 1930s. There was even a craze about it. It just wasn't the mainstream. I see my time is dwindling, so really, concluding all of this, gay theater is by, for, and about gay people. Lanford Wilson was able to achieve great success and really launch something powerful in the mid-1960s, 1964 to be exact. However, the reasons for this launch very much imply that it was because it was finally being accepted, pieces and entertainment were finally being written about and being staged, when in fact these things reigned true in the 1930s with Mae West. And her and other people and performers' efforts in portraying homosexuality on stage and in entertainment in a positive way. So although kudos to Lanford Wilson and Cafe Chino and what they created, Mae West and other performers of the 1930s also deserve a large amount of credit for fostering positive attitudes for their work and everything that they did. So that concludes my presentation. I really hope you enjoyed it and learned something. Thank you guys.